This is Geometry, Unit 1.8a. We're going to measure and classify angles. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what an angle is. An angle is made up of two rays. And the two rays are going to share the same endpoint. And we call that endpoint the vertex. So of an angle, we have a vertex, and we have two sides to this angle. Both of the sides are a ray. So in this case, if we called this V, that would be pretty creative for vertex. We could call this angle V. Sometimes the angle symbol will use a little curve inside of it. It kind of looks like a protractor, a compass. And angle V. Another way we can name that angle is if we have a point on each of the sides. So if we want to call this A and B, we could call that angle AVB, or we could call that angle BVA. Notice each time the V is the middle letter. In some cases, we can name an angle using one letter. You can always name an angle using three letters, as long as there's appropriate labeling to do so. Sometimes you're not allowed to use one letter, and that's going to be tricky, and we'll talk about when we can do that. Here's some vocab that you're pretty familiar with. Acute angle. If you have an angle that is rather small, we can still call that V if you like. We could say the measure of angle V. Now notice the difference. This is an angle symbol, and less than 90 degrees. That's an inequality. If angle V is an acute angle, then we know that the measure of angle V is going to be less than 90 degrees. A right angle, you might be aware of what a right angle is. In a right angle, we like to identify all the right angles with a box in the corner. You got to listen to this carefully. If it does not have a box in the corner, you cannot assume it's 90 degrees. There's going to be times where you look at the figure and you're going to say, oh, that's a right angle. And I'll ask, why is it a right angle? Well, because it looks like one. But this one is a right angle because it has a box. Okay? It has to have the box. It has to tell you it's a right angle. You can't just assume it because it looks like one. So this would be the measurement of angle V equals 90 degrees. Notice how we use the M in front of the angle when we're talking about measurement. That's notation that you need to have in there correctly. An obtuse angle, those are the big angles. It's going to be between 90 and 180. So if we call this one V down here, we could say the measurement of angle, and I'll put my little curve in there. Measurement of angle V is greater than 108, greater than 90. Not greater than 180. It actually just goes to 90. But the main thing we're focusing on are angles greater than 90 are obtuse, angles less than 90 are acute, and if you're equal to 90, then you are right. We've talked about a straight angle. A straight angle are two rays. We can put V in the middle again if you like. That could be a figure for a straight angle. And the measurement of angle CVD is going to equal exactly 180 degrees. This degree value all the way from one ray to the other is 180 degrees. If we take an angle and divide it right down the center, then we have what's called an angle bisector. We cut that angle exactly in half. Very similar to a segment bisector. We use a little curve inside each of these angles to indicate that they are the same measurement. Remember when we had segments, we used a little tick mark on it. Here you could call these angle tick marks. So if we labeled a point up here to be A, and a point out here to be B, and a point out here to be C, we could still call the vertex V if you like. Any letter will do. We could say that angle AVB is congruent to angle CVB. Notice I do not use an M when I'm talking about congruence. When I'm talking about the size and shape of the figure, that's not a measurement. That is an angle value, or that's an angle shape. They are congruent to each other. You do not use the M. If you like to put the curve in the angles, you're allowed to do that. You're welcome to. I felt like I needed to before because I was using inequalities also. I was using the little Pac-Man symbols. So I thought it was very important to identify the difference. But when we typically talk about an angle, we don't usually take the time to put that extra curve in there. Sometimes that looks too much like a triangle. Congruent angles. If angle A is congruent to angle B, if you have two angles that if you set them on top of each other are the same size and shape, then you know then the measure of angle A is going to equal the measure of angle B. So if congruent, then you know it's equal. There are times where we need to work with it in congruence. There's other times we need to work with it in equality. Now we're going to come down and talk about how we name angles. What's the appropriate way? Look at what's different here. We have this pencil shading that represents one angle. We have this pen shading that represents a different angle. And then we have the highlighter that represents a third angle. So there's three different angles we're looking at. So this first angle, ABC, angle ABC. Or you can name it in the opposite order, angle CBA. But notice the vertex has to be the middle letter. Middle letter is the vertex. Now let's name the pen shading. That would be CBD, angle CBD. Or you can switch that order, DBC. Notice how I have the angle symbol. You need to use the angle symbol when you're talking about an angle. Don't just use three letters. I don't know if you're talking about a plane That's why we have to use the word plane in front of 3 letters, because it's different than an angle using 3 letters. We never name a segment with 3 letters. Okay, then the last one is the big highlighting shading. It's the whole angle. So we call that angle A. That's a point on one side of the angle. The vertex, which is the B, and any point along the other side, which in this case is only D. So angle AD, or angle ABD. Or you can switch those letters and call it angle DBA. Notice that every one of these had the vertex in the middle. The vertex has to be in the middle. You can use the other points that are on the edge, but the vertex has to be in the middle. Now look here that we had 3 different angles all using the same vertex. So we should not and could not use just one letter, angle B. This is where some people might make a mistake. They call it angle B, but we cannot and should not call it angle B because they share a vertex. If multiple angles have that same vertex, we cannot use the vertex to name it, because I don't know which angle you're talking about. You're talking about the pencil, you're talking about the pen, you're talking about the highlighter, if you say angle B. So we flip it over. We have a couple questions we can talk about here. This is a protractor. So we're going to use this protractor to identify the measurement of angle WSR. There should be an M sitting in front of that angle WSR. So when you come down here, you want to find W. So you want to use your pencil, you want to use your finger, or at least use your eyes, and find the W, the S, and the R. And that's what you're tracing out with your finger, with your pencil, or at least with your eyes, WSR. And if you look up here, you'll see that it's in between the 110 and 120. But this is a small angle, so it cannot be an obtuse answer. So we're going to use the smaller numbers, the numbers that started with 0 down here and came up to it. That's the shorter distance, essentially. That is 65 degrees, halfway between 65 and 70. Or halfway between 60 and 70 is 65 degrees, and we write the degrees symbol in the corner. Let's look at TSW. So using your eyes, you're finding T, S, and W. You can trace it out with your finger, your pencil. Notice where TSW is, starting at 0. It's coming all the way around to the same location we were before. That is bigger than 90, so that's going to be the 115. Halfway between 110 and 120. 110, 120 is 115. The measurement of angle RST. Find the R, find the S, find the T. You're going to go all the way up and over. You're going past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and even farther. So that's 180 degrees. And then our last one we have here is the measurement of angle VST from 0 all the way up to the 90. So that's 90 degrees. The last question is having us practice naming our angles again. So we have angle FGJ or angle JGF. Or the right one out here, we have JGH or HGJ. And then we could finish up with FGH or angle HGF. There are 6 ways, 6 different, at least 3 different angles, 6 ways you can name some of these angles. All right, everyone.